I think we'll see a shift. I think some of that money that's salvageable will come out of the crypto sphere and into the precious metals, and particularly silver, because it's the most undervalued asset on a relative basis of any other financial asset that you can name.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and this is the Miles Franklin Weekly Special for November 15th through 22nd, 2022, while supplies last. This week we have a Queen Elizabeth special, 2 coins bearing the portrait of the late monarch. First, we have a silver Britannia at only $8 over spot. While the Royal Mint has already started minting King Charles commemorative coins, they made the unexpected decision that this first run of 2023 Britannia would still have the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. Our second special this week is silver maples. We secured a shipment of backdated silver maples, including full mint-sealed monster boxes from years prior to 2022, and they are available at $8 over spot as well. The silver maple, made by the Royal Canadian Mint, is 4/9 fine and was the first bullion coin minted to that exemplary purity. They are one of the most recognized bullion coins in the world. Both our specials this week, the Silver Britannia and the Silver Maple, are $8 over spot while supplies last. They come in tubes of 25 and boxes of 500 and are IRA eligible. If you'd like to learn more about a precious metals IRA, call us, and we'll be happy to help you in that process. Our number for all orders is 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Hey everyone, this is Elijah K. Johnson with Liberty and Finance. And back with us today is our good friend David Morgan, the Silver Guru, from the Morgan Report. David, thank you so much for joining us today.
Elijah, it's good to be back.
Well, it's great to have you, and I wanted to get your perspective on the recent rise we've seen in silver. I know last time we had you on, we were definitely below the levels we are right now, so it's been quite a good rally we've had here in the last days and weeks. I know you had said that by the end of the year, it's very possible that something could break in the physical markets, where we might have people not being able to get physical metal. Your perspective on where we stand right now?
Well, hopefully I didn't say very probable, but it is always probable that there could be some mismatch. And just to further that idea, this First State Depository that is responsible for holding precious metals for many gold and silver IRA accounts has gone into receivership. So that would kind of say, oh, well, David's somewhat right. Now, did that really disrupt the market? Well, no, it didn't really disrupt the entire silver market, but all those people that had precious metals IRAs, it certainly disrupted them to a great extent. So that's kind of what I was more or less trying to imply. But on a bigger scale, you're still correct. There could be something large enough that it affects the market at large. But, that's a black swan. I think it's more important to focus on the overall trend than, a particular black swan, but nonetheless, you have to bear that in mind. In other words, what you've said, what I've said, what your brothers have said, if you don't hold it, you don't own it. And that's really the smartest place to be, even in an IRA. And I just want to jump on that a little bit more. I mean, when people ask if they want, if they ask, David, what's your opinion on having gold and silver in an IRA versus outside of an IRA? I always have the same answer. It's best to have it outside of an IRA. But for many people, their only savings or the bulk of their savings is in an IRA. So in that, or some type of vested, government approved savings program, a SEP IRA, Roth IRA, whatever. So in those cases, I say, absolutely, it's better to have it, or some of it anyway, in precious metals than not at all. But as far as safety is concerned, you want something that's that precious outside of any government intervention, if at all possible.
And can you expand on the importance of that? I think that's really key. And then also with respect to storage facilities, I know all the storage facilities that Miles Franklin partners with are always going to be segregated, audited, and allocated, which not all storage facilities are. Sometimes they're pooled and stuff like that. So can you explain the importance of kind of all of that?
Sure. I've had about 3 consultations for people that had metal through an IRA in the First State Depository. And two of them were in segregated accounts. So if you read the contract, what it says about segregated, in theory, and I want to emphasize the word theory, they should be able to get their metal back because it's been, segregated. The exact coins they put in are the exact coins they get out. That's what segregated means. Now, I don't expect that to happen, but at least I asked them to make reference to it and send it to both the IRA and also to the First State Depository Receivership website. And at least they have it on the record. Whenever you go into allocated or unallocated, you're playing with fire. Even though you've allocated this amount of silver over there in this pile, it's still a pile of silver. So whatever you put into that pile doesn't necessarily mean you're going to get it back out. You'll get silver out of the pile, but not what you put in. In a lot of cases, that wouldn't matter like on an industrial user, but on an investment basis, I would always go for segregated and pay the more expensive amount for storage and be safe than I would on an allocated. Unallocated is just what it says. It's just silver flying around there. It can be paper, it can be physical, it can be a mishmash of loaned out silver that's due. It could be partially options on futures. It could be a number of things. And it's all legal, by the letter of the law. But it's the worst way to hold a position in silver, or gold. So I would just reiterate what you and I have said so many times. That's the general breakdown.
When we're looking at the supply of silver, if you look at, for example, the registered inventories, it seems like there's been a steady decrease ever since silver squeeze, and it's just gotten worse and worse. Can you expand for our viewers kind of what we're seeing right now on the COMEX and LBMA?
Sure. As said on many channels that there's been a huge drawdown, both the COMEX and the LBMA. And again, going back to what I was talking about with this first depository and on the previous interview, that something could break. Again, just think about this First State Depository. Is that the only one that's doing some shenanigans, I'll call it, with the precious metals that is in their vault? And the answer is no. There could be another one or two or 5 or 10. I don't know. Well, I do know that there's the high probability of more than just First State Depository. So that's the kind of information I was trying to convey on the last interview. It's not necessarily something breaks on the COMEX or the LBMA, which it could. It's more subtle than that. It's more about, let's say, storage facility that's well regarded. First State Depository, well known and been in business for quite some time and highly trusted. That's why these IRA custodians used it, because it was fine until it wasn't. So I think there's more of that to come. And as far as the stockpile decreasing, it's going to be interesting. I've seen the COMEX down to the level we're at right now, and then all of a sudden, out of somewhere comes a very substantial amount of silver to replenish the registered category. But I'm not seeing it this time, yet anyway. And I also, looking at the LBMA, I know they have a different attitude with the association that's not quite as restrictive as what the COMEX is, meaning that you're not sure with that bar sitting on a shelf somewhere how many real potential owners there are in that bar. And so even though the inventory may be there, there could be an overage of claims against it versus what the physical properties are. So I do think that we are getting close. I do think that the investment community that's moved into precious metals will continue to add to their stockpiles, their investment, and the fact that Wall Street Silver and others have started to educate many people that were unaware of what happens at the end of the great empires when the inflation experiment comes to an end again and all fiat fails, and knowing that it will fail probably within their lifetime, at least for those that are, certain age group. So I think I've said enough, but it's really important to realize that there are these subtleties going on behind the scenes. In fact, I talked to somebody that's really pretty grounded and well known in the silver community, and they were unaware of this first state depository going under and never said, I know it all. I don't. I'm not a know it all. I'm a learn it all, but that's one I was aware of. But, it's not front page news, at least not right now.
When it comes to the silver price, though, going into the end of the year, it seems like we've seen quite a bit of a rise in the last couple weeks. Do you anticipate this to continue? Do you think we've seen a bottom? And where do we go from here?
That's the toughest one. I'm going to say probably flat to perhaps lower. Why do I say that? Probabilities. I mean, we've seen the lowest print on silver and gold several years on the last trading day of the year. And there's tax loss selling. There's uncertainty in the market. Silver's caught a bid and it's looked good. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope it finishes the year strong. You can almost bet that it's going to do well in January. It almost always does. That's another high probability. But going into the end of the year, probably neutral. There'll be people that have just given up or they want to sell it for, gains they had in, let's say, other parts of the stock market or whatever, do a wash. They'll take the loss on their silver stock and the gain on their technology stock and have a less tax exposure or that type of thing. So hard to predict. And there's less enthusiasm at the end of the market. You get into the U.S. holidays for Thanksgiving and Christmas. There's a lot less volume. So the markets move a little easier because when there's low volume, you can move the market up or down easily because there's not many participants. So I'm going to say flat to just slightly down, probably.
And do you think we've hit the bottom, though, with respect to gold and silver?
I do. That's not the most popular stance, but it's mine. I really do believe that we have hit the bottom. I called the bottom at 1850. Was proven wrong, but not by much and not for very long. If you go to the time I said it, I was a little early, but like in a couple of weeks or less. And as far as price, close enough to 1850. So I think with what we've seen with the volumes, and now, with this article that just came out, as far as I know, yesterday from the Silver Institute, that they're looking for a deficit of 200 million ounces. That's significant. Solar's taking 10% of the industrial side. Industry isn't slowing down on silver usage because of the alt energy push. And investors are waking up to the silver story. And last and not least is the silver psyop. Why did all this money that potentially went into silver go into cryptocurrencies? Because they were there. But it doesn't take much of a shift out of cryptos into the safety and sanity of silver to push the market even higher.
No, when it comes to other, what are seen as safe havens nowadays or alternative currencies, we're seeing a very interesting thing happen in the cryptocurrencies, the FTX scandal and all that, which is impacting the value of Bitcoin. We're seeing it down around 16,000 right now, down 15 to 20% of where it was a couple weeks ago. Your perspective on that whole situation right now?
Well, I think it's done enough damage to really hurt the whole crypto sphere for probably a few years. I mean, not that some will climb up from this, where they're at right now. But overall, there'll be a lot of skepticism going into any cryptocurrency for quite some time. And a lot of people, pension funds, major brokerage houses, leverage players, hedge funds, notables that are, financial quote unquote experts that have backed FTX or cryptos in general. I think it's been significant enough to impact it again for quite some time. And I again think that there'll be some, let's say, wise individuals that realize the difference between a metal disc that's proven to be outside. It's the most decentralized finance available, far superior to any purported decentralized finance that's dependent on a blockchain, a computer, the electrical grid, and also the counterparty. Whereas if you hold it and own it, it's been good for 4,000 or 5,000 years. It's probably going to be good for the rest of your lifetime. So I think we'll see a shift. I think some of that money that's salvageable will come out of the crypto sphere and into the precious metals, and particularly silver, because it's the most undervalued asset on a relative basis of any other financial asset that you can name.
Now, in the cryptocurrency sphere as well, we're seeing big news from the Fed announcing the digital dollar and the test run of that with more than half a dozen banks, large banks in the U.S. Your perspective on that? I just interviewed Robert Kainz, and he was, really sounding the alarm that this could be the beginning of a lot of loss of liberty and a lot of greater control in the monetary system by the Fed. Your perspective on the digital dollar?
Well, I haven't listened to Rob's interview yet, but I concur. I know him fairly well. They want to switch us over into a new system that's modern money theory, no cash at all, cashless society. You've got to have a digital ID that they approve of, that you are you, and that you have to command what their edict is, meaning that if they say you had too many carbon credits used, you can't buy any more meat for the rest of the month. If you've used too many carbon credits, you can't travel further than 10-mile radius from where you're located. I mean, these type of things, it's onerous beyond belief, and it sounds so sci-fi, so science fiction, that most people just scoff at it unless they actually have the open-mindedness to look at it and observe it and actually verify what I'm saying. But those of us that have been at the tip of the spear for so long, looking at what the banking elite have done with the control mechanism through the money power, it fits together perfectly, and it's the next step in a command control system. And this is what the way we are headed. And it's being tested now, as you just said. I just put on my Twitter post that some of these larger banking entities are doing a test run. It actually got implemented in November. That's in one of my videos, that I think it's ISO 20020 or something, 2022. Anyway, the point is that it's already been implemented, but it's behind the scenes. Most people never think about how an ATM works, or what the interbank connectivity is, or how the SWIFT system really operates, or any of that stuff. They just, they spend their money and they bank, and they do the basics, but they don't really think through how the whole thing functions. And the outcome may appear to be the same, but the functioning of it is changing radically, and I'll call it in their favor, meaning they will be able to track, trace, and tax everything you do, and also control it.
So in that case, how do people opt out of the system, or can they in this circumstance?
I would say you could. Certainly gold and silver is outside the system. Again, the most decentralized financial monetary asset. But, will there be restrictions imposed by the powers that want to be or not? I don't know. It could be. I don't worry too much about that. I think there's going to be a lot of people that reject the new system. And so it's not a guarantee it's going to be implemented, but it's certainly going to be, a lot of people will be forced into it. And it remains to be determined how many blindly walk in and say, yeah, this is great, I'm ready for the new, system. And it's how many say, no, I don't want it. We don't know. But, you can look at like the Mennonites or the Amish or some other groups that basically it really won't affect. They're not they're not going to go into this, beast system. They're going to be outside of it. And any rugged individualist could pretty much do the same. You'd have to build a community and start growing your own food, raising your own animals, and basically do things without money, do things that money could buy, the equipment, the tools, the shelter, the feed, everything you need to basically go cashless. And I know that sounds extreme, but you're asking the question, I'll answer it. And there'll be variables in between those. But the main thing is how many people are just going to go along with the new system. And I don't know. If I was going to, make a guess, I would say probably 50%. These are people that, need to be dependent, and they will be given like a universal basic income, and all they've got to do is get their digital ID down to their local grocery store, get their iris scan, their fingerprint, their DNA sample, and they're in. You are you, and you are your identity. Now we have you in the banking system, and you're controlled by us. But you get a free check or a free credit every month to spend as you see fit, unless we see differently.
Now, some people might be watching it as like, well, not all of the implications or all of the that hasn't been rolled out entirely. This is just a test of the digital dollar. So, it's not like the Fed is proposing that they're going to restrict what people can spend, and they're not talking about universal basic income yet and all that. But it seems like those kinds of restrictions would be possible given the proposed platform and are logically what this would lead to. Would you agree with that?
I would. I mean, I'm not trying to scare anyone, but if you look at it logically, I mean, there's a friend of mine, John Leffler, does a program called Steel on Steel. He always talks about the slippery slope. And of course, it's going to be sold, or the propaganda will be it's more convenient, it's faster, it could be peer-to-peer, and there will be those advantages. So I'll admit that. But in the longer term, they will subtly sneak in this thing that is for your own good, that we have to monitor what your carbon score is. Everyone's carbon score is being monitored. And after all, you don't want your carbon score to be too big. So what we're going to do now is we're going to say, blah, 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 blah. So it's the direction. It's pretty easy to see if you've been, in my seat for so long. Am I a visionary? I would say not, but I've certainly been ahead of the curve on a lot of these trends. And this is the one I see the way they want it. And they're not the other parts of the data. I mean, if you look at what Mark Carney said back before he changed his position, but when he was at the Bank of England and spoke at the UN, Davos, and Jackson, it was basically the same speech, and it outlined basically what I just said. I've embellished it for, the control mechanism, but that's part of the system. It's there. Will they not use it because they have the availability? Well, you think about that.
Well, David Morgan, thank you so much for joining us today. Before we let you go, where can our viewers find you online? And any last thoughts you had for our viewers?
No last thoughts this week, Elijah. Thank you. At Silver Guru 22 is my Twitter feed. There's a lot of scammers that use at Silver Guru, and they put in 2 R's or 2 E's or whatever, and they pretend to be me. So be careful. My channel is at Silver Guru 22. That is me. Anything else, check the lettering. If it's not that, it's some scammer. A lot of people have come and asked if, is this you? I'm not sure. And it's not. A lot of it had to do with, let's say, cryptos that I would never be favorable to. So there's that. The main website's themorganreport.com. Make sure to check the blog once or twice a week. Best things to get on our free e-letter.
All right. Fantastic. David, once again, thank you so much for your time, and God bless.
God bless you too.
Miles Franklin Precious Metals is one of America's oldest and most trusted bullion dealers. Miles Franklin is A+ rated and accredited by the Better Business Bureau, licensed and bonded, and has 0 complaints ever registered. Here at Liberty and Finance, we are licensed brokers with Miles Franklin. To order, simply call us, discuss your needs, and we will let you know our live inventory, prices, and availability, and lock in your order over the phone. Once your order is locked, the price is held for you regardless of market fluctuations, and the metals are reserved for you awaiting your settled payment. Within 1 business day of ordering, you will receive an email invoice detailing the order and payment instructions. Miles Franklin accepts payments by bank wire, ACH or electronic check, money order, check mailed priority mail, and cryptocurrency. The fastest forms of payment are bank wire and cryptocurrency. Upon settled payment, metals will ship out within 3 to 5 business days. You will receive tracking information via email. Domestic shipping charges are $15 for any order under 500 ounces of silver or 10 ounces of gold. For orders larger than that, domestic shipping is free. The package will be double boxed, fully insured, and labeled discreetly, with no indication of the contents inside. For your privacy, the name Miles Franklin will not even be on the package. To talk to myself, Elijah, my brother Kaiser, or my father Dunnigan, call 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237.